Welcome. This is Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. And as we're set to deliberate all the latest developments here in Israel throughout the region, with chief focus on the Syrian theater, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Yemen, much more, let's now turn to welcome our guests, as ever, from left to right, Dr. Mike Duran, the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East, a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, and formerly the senior director at the National Security Council in Washington for the Middle East and North Africa. Next to him, Dr. Jonathan Shechter, formerly the chief foreign policy advisor at the Prime Minister's office here in Jerusalem, currently a senior fellow at Hudson Institute. And next to him, of course, Brigadier General in Reserve, Yossi Cooperwasser, formerly the Director General of the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs, the head of the IDF Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Division, and a long list of other positions that we won't have enough time to go through all of them in one edition. So as ever, Dr. Duran, we'll start with you. The current situation, if we look, and the northern front is quite fluid. Over the weekend, we had the commander of Central Command, General Michael Eric Kurilla, visiting Israel, having a strategic situation assessment together with his Israeli counterpart, the IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, during the course of which they focused on the Syrian theater, but also on the Iranian front. Of course, everybody are looking at where the Iranians are moving from here after losing the Syrian state, quite simply. How do you characterize the current state of play?
Well, thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here. Of course, the big question that everyone is concerned about right now in the Middle East is the character of the new Syrian government and its strong relations with Turkey. What does that mean? Is that good or bad for Israel? Is that good or bad for the Gulf? That's, I think, the number one thing on everyone's mind. The Israelis, as we've discussed in the past, are, of course, also thinking about the next phase in the war with Iran. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, of course, is interested in destroying Iran's nuclear program. He is hoping that Donald Trump will support him so that he can finish this war with victory as he has defined it. With respect to the Syria question, there's a lot of unease in Arab capitals, in Gulf capitals. You could say Gulf monarchies in general, also in Jordan, they don't like to see Islamist revolutionaries toppling governments. This makes them extraordinarily nervous. I would say the nervousness is probably most pronounced in the United Arab Emirates. It's also pronounced in Jordan, in Egypt. The Saudis have interestingly taken a kind of middle position, a kind of wait and see. Maybe these guys in Damascus are somebody we can work with. The Qataris are very much aligned with the Turks, and they are all in support of the new government. The Israelis, I think, are very much influenced by their Arab neighbors, and they're very worried. My own personal assessment, for what it's worth, Jonathan, is I'm a great believer in the pragmatism of the Turks, and I'm building on the fact that the Turkish national interest, as I understand it, is very much aligned with what I think is the Israeli national interest and the American national interest, and that if we play our cards, and when I say we, I mean the United States and Israel, if we play our cards intelligently and carefully, we'll be able to get to a solution here in Syria that is going to be to the benefit of everyone. But it's by no means going to be a cakewalk or a walk in the park. There's going to be a lot of challenges as we move through this very difficult terrain.
Absolutely. Dr. Shechter, I'd like to hear your take on this, particularly at a time when we see the Jaish al-Watani, the Syrian National Army, not taking the lead in Damascus. Rather, we do see Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an affiliate of al-Qaeda, most would say. And just over the weekend, we had also Gail Peterson, the special envoy of the United Nations, meeting with him in Damascus, discussing with him different elements of UN Security Council Resolution 2254, where he did highlight that adjustments need to be made in this resolution in order to accommodate reality on the ground. It raises some questions in my mind, since I remember roughly a decade ago, a day after September 11th of 2014, when I met with a group of Fijian troops who were captured and then released on September 11th of that year by Jabhat al-Nusra under the leadership of al-Julani, when this al-Qaeda affiliate, again, launched an offensive against various UN UNDOF posts within the demilitarized zone of the 1974 armistice line. Is that not something that sits in the back of the head of the United Nations when it deals with al-Julani?
I'm sure it does, and of course, the United Nations has shown that it's able to work with a great spectrum of players across the Middle East, as long as they are not Israel. And but I think, just building on what Mike said, I think there's an interesting dynamic going on, in the sense that I think it's pretty widely understood that the fall of Assad, the blows that Hezbollah and Hamas have taken are seen as defeats for Iran, which I'm sure makes the most of the countries of the region, in the Gulf in particular, very happy. On the other hand, I think there is this concern about what the alternative is going to be, and if the alternative is going to be, as Mike said, Sunni Islamist extremists, I think that gives them heartburn, even going back to the days of the Arab Spring, when Mubarak fell and was replaced by the Muslim Brotherhood, which I think has caused lasting heartburn across the region. How practical the new Syrian government is going to be. I use government very loosely here. We'll see what kind of structure is there. How practical? I think there's a question here about on the one hand, the practicality of the Turks and the Qataris. On the other hand, the ideology of the Turks and the Qataris, or their governments. And I think the big question right now is which one of those is going to predominate in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Schechter. General Cooperwasser, I'd like to ask you, how does Israel view Syria at the current state in play? And if you could, break it down for us, please.
Well, I think that Israel looks at what's happening in Syria with two kinds of lenses. One is what's going to happen in Syria. And in this respect, what we are interested in is to make sure that whatever government they have over there is not capable of forming the capability to threaten Israel's security. That's why we took control of the buffer zone, and that's why we are bombarding the weapons arsenal of the former regime, and everybody can watch the nice explosions. That's on the one hand. And we wish that the government of Syria, the next government of Syria, without the capability to harm us, will adopt a more friendly, neighborly attitude towards Israel, not because they love us, but because they don't have any other option. And that's, if you follow what Julani is saying, is more or less shows understanding that this is the case. And he just complains that we continue bombarding the military facilities when there's no threat posed from Syria towards Israel at this point after the Iranians have left. So this is one lens, and I think we're doing a very good job. We are concerned with one thing, even though we're doing this good job, and this is the fate of the minorities. We have some special place in our hearts for the Druze and for the Kurds, and we want to make sure that they are integrated into the new government, and their autonomy, to some extent, at least of the Kurds, is respected. And there's some sort of commitment from Israel's point of view to their safe safety and to the well-being. And I don't know that we have enough power in order to translate this commitment to realities on the ground, but we at least speak in this direction. The other lens that we are looking at the situation is the regional aspect. And in this respect, you see, in the Middle East, there are three major axes operating and competing for hegemony. The Iranian axis that is suffering heavy blows and losing everything, one bastion after the other. And losing Assad was a major defeat for the Iranian axis, because you can't have an axis if you cannot reach Lebanon from Iran through Syria. You can't support the Hezbollah. So it's a very frustrating situation for the Iranians. And with everything else that's happening, Trump coming in, the Israeli attacks in Iran in late October, everything is going in the wrong direction. No wonder that the rial is losing its value by the hour, and the Iranian axis is suffering terribly, which gives all kinds of opportunities for Israel, because Israel says, well, since this is the case, let's finish the job. And the Iranians are trying to mitigate the losses by encouraging the Yemenites, the Houthis, to launch all kinds of projectiles towards Israel to say we are still here. And I just came out from the bomb shelter half an hour ago after the attack from a ballistic missile from Yemen. And on the other hand, there is the moderate, pragmatic axis that is still not winning anything of what's going on here, because it is so slow in action and unable to act as a camp, as something that is united. And that's a pity, because what happened in Syria was that the third axis, the Muslim Brotherhood axis, is the one that is gaining power, led by Turkey and Qatar. And this is not exactly to our liking. Yes, compared with the alternative that the Iranian axis was going to keep gaining ground, it's better to have the Muslim Brotherhood axis in Syria. But it is another sort of problem. And Israel is concerned with this rise of the Turkish aspirations to become the hegemon power through the presence of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a major concern for Turkey, for Jordan, for Egypt. They are all having Muslim Brotherhood problems at home, and they are challenged by them. And it's something that we are worried about, and we should have to see how we make sure that the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood or the radical Sunnis in Syria does not threaten the stability of our peace friends, both in the Gulf and in Egypt and Syria and Jordan. That's where we stand.
Indeed. Thank you for this elaborate breakdown. It does provide much insight. And with that, Dr. Durand, may I challenge you?
Sure, I was just getting ready to challenge you and Yossi, so I'm happy to be challenged. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, let me ask you this. When we're talking about your comment earlier that the strategic interests of Turkey, Israel, and America align, while I do agree with you on the geostrategic level, my question here is, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan came out and stressed that the top national security interest for Turkey at this point in time is to eradicate the YPG, namely the extension of the PKK as Ankara views it. Now, Israel, on its perspective, looks at it and says, yes, there is a social construct in Syria where there are various families where you'll have one brother a member of the PKK and another brother a member of the YPG or PYD or whatever organization is currently operating within Syria. And therefore, there needs to be a pragmatic engagement with the Kurds, who are an important minority in Syria, such as the important minority also in Iraq and in Turkey and in Iran, among others. But the Americans come and say, okay, we look at the Kurds, the YPG, as the most important component within the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is under the Operation Inherent Resolve, that is the US-led coalition to defeat the Islamic State. And when in the past we approached Turkey to be that force on the ground to assist the US-led coalition, they said no. So within this context, there is still an ongoing concern amongst all the relevant parties in the region, including the United States and including Turkey for that matter, that are concerned about the reemergence of the Islamic State. So how about you'll make for us a little bit of a organizational monologue of where we're at this point and where do those interests that you referred to earlier converging?
Well, that's great, and I actually see the whole situation in Syria and in northeast Syria radically differently than you and Yossi see it. And so, at the risk of going on and on too much, I'll just hit the major points where I disagree with you. When I look at the politics of the region, I'm struck by the fact that there are only three regional powers, who have the ability to project military force beyond their borders, and that's Israel, Turkey, and Iran. And that's the game in security terms. What Yossi called the moderate axis doesn't have the ability to project power. It's dependent on the United States for that. So to the extent that we're in a hard power game, it's a contest among Israel, Turkey, and Iran. I don't think it makes sense to talk about the Turkish Qatari axis as a Muslim Brotherhood axis. I don't think that the Turks are making their foreign defense and national security policy based on ideology. I do think that some of the instruments that they're using are increasing the power of Islamist forces. That's true, but it's not the goal of the Turks to do that. They have very practical goals that they want. The number one of which, as you mentioned, is destroying the PKK autonomous zones, which are backed up by the United States. I was very struck by the fact that Yossi said Israel has an interest or a kind of affection, concern, whatever, I can't remember what word he used. He said, but we don't have much power to influence this. I think it's very important to stress that last point. You don't have any power to influence it. And therefore, it's very dangerous to even talk about it for two reasons. Number one, I am willing to bet a lot of money that Donald Trump is going to pull the American forces out of northeast Syria. I would bet a lot of money on that, and I would bet a lot of money that it's going to happen in the first year of his coming into power. There's going to be a huge fight in the Trump administration about this. But I think the president wants to do it. CENTCOM, whom Israel is talking to, is now Israel's main American military partner. CENTCOM loves the position it has in northeast Syria and wants to hold on to it. But it is enraging the Turks, and when I say the Turks, I mean all of them. Erdogan's biggest enemies, and even a large number of the Kurds. The majority of Kurds in Turkey and possibly in Syria as well are not PKK supporters, and the PKK has been foisted on them because the United States, the greatest power on earth, has decided to align with the PKK in Syria. It's the biggest mistake the United States has ever made in the Middle East that I have seen, because it alienates the greatest military power in the Middle East, namely Turkey. And once again, I say all of Turkey, including the most pragmatic national security elements that Israel would want to engage with. So that's the essence of my analysis. I think the Israelis, every time they make a statement in support of the Kurds, and by which they mean the PKK-dominated elements in northeast Syria, they are betting on a horse that has already lost the race. That construct, that coalition that the United States built under the PKK in northeast Syria is already collapsing under the pressure of the rise of the Syrian National Army. And if the Americans don't pull the plug, the Turks are going to start eroding and destroying it while the Americans are still there. This is very obvious to me.
So we do disagree only on one point, where I don't think that Israel supports the PKK in any way or fashion, let alone the fact that it is a designated terrorist organization recognized as such by Israel. So that's one point.
Sorry to interject here, but when Israel says it is very concerned about the Kurds and it doesn't want to see the Americans leave, that is read in Ankara as support for PKK. So, and I don't think when Israelis say this, I don't think they have really studied the issue really very closely either. Most of them, I mean, I think that they aren't really thinking about how their rhetoric is being read in Ankara and how their friends in Washington's rhetoric is being read as an extension of Israeli policy.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Shechtel, I'd like also to bring Iran into the picture. I know you want to respond to a couple of points that Dr. Duran just made, I'm sure, but nonetheless, we don't have very much time for that. And therefore, if you can give a little bit of insight, where is Iran right now in its race towards nuclear proliferation? And is this something that we should be concerned about before January 20th?
Yeah, so Iran, by all reports, is closer than it's ever been to a nuclear weapon. They announced after the last IAEA Board of Governors meeting, which censured Iran for its continued non-cooperation. But again, as we've talked about before, not necessarily having to do with the JCPOA, but with its own obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In response to that censure, Iran announced that it was going to be increasing its enrichment infrastructure, so it would be enriching even more 60% uranium at a faster pace than it's been doing up until now. As the IAEA, which is overly careful in its language, even said already a couple of years ago, the Secretary General said that there's no country that is enriching at 60% for peaceful purposes. There's a real question right now. On the one hand, people have talked about the blows that Iran has taken, both in Gaza vis-a-vis Hamas and in Lebanon with Hezbollah, and losing the Assad regime in Syria. And in Iran itself, after the Israeli response to the Iranian missile attacks in late October, that, again, according to the public reporting, has said left Iran largely defenseless in terms of its air defense and its ability to produce missiles. The question is, does that situation inspire Iran to try and make a dash for the bomb now because it feels so vulnerable, because it feels that it has no other choice? And so now there's a race or a potential race between, is Iran going to do this, or is Iran going to continue to sort of chip away at it? Again, with everybody knowing that less than a year from now, in late 2025, the snapback mechanism of the JCPOA expires, and with it all of the previous Security Council resolutions from the early 2000s, which banned uranium enrichment of any kind, had a missile embargo, a weapons embargo. All of those will expire, be canceled, and the ability to reinstate those will basically disappear, because in the current environment, largely because of the war in Ukraine, but not only, the ability to pass resolutions like that in the Security Council does not exist. So there's some questions, some real timeline questions here. But in any case, this seems like a burning issue, if not in in the month or so that's left before President Trump resumes office, certainly in the next 10 months or so.
General Kupelwasser, you have 1 minute for this. What should Israel do to confront the Iranian threat? And is this not a time to tell the Iranians unequivocally, for any rocket that comes from any of your proxies, we will come after you directly?
Well, we're coming after them directly, and I think that what is most important now is to prepare the ground for the post-Trump entrance to the Oval Office period. And what we should do together with the Americans is form a joint policy on the Iranian issue, especially on the Iran nuclear file. And it has to be made of maximum pressure and giving an opportunity for the Iranians to give up on their program before their strike, before there's a strike against it. And at the same time, prepare ourselves to do what needs to be done if they are not ready to work out an agreement that would deprive them from the capability to produce nuclear weapons ever. And I think this is what has to be done. We have prepared the ground to a large extent by breaking the axis of evil of the Iranians, Hezbollah and Hamas. We shouldn't worry about the deterrence posed by Hezbollah anymore. We have striped them off the air defenses, as Jonathan said, and we have decimated their capabilities to produce new missiles. All of that is extremely important, and most of all, we have proven to the Americans and to the Iranians together, and to ourselves, that there is a credible military option. And once this has been proven, this entire game is a different ball game, because beforehand everybody was talking about the need to establish, and this was established already. Now let's see what does it mean that we have a credible military option, and this should be worked out between us and the Americans. And if the Europeans want to join in by snapping back the sanctions, as Jonathan alluded, then all the better.
Thank you, General Kupelwasser. I'll immediately also thank Dr. Schechter and Dr. Duran for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition of Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute, from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a good day.